the original caller ID information during the transmission of a telephone call. This measure was passed by the House of Representatives on the suspension calendar during each of the last two Congresses, but the Senate to date has not acted on the measure. I look forward to advancing this legislation today and working with our Senate colleagues to ensure its enactment into law during the course of the current Congress. I want to thank Mr. Engel, who is a member of our full committee, for his commitment to this matter and for his highly constructive work. I'll be offering a manager's amendment that harmonizes this measure with a separate Judiciary Committee bill and creates an exception for authorized law enforcement activities. The final measure that we have on today's agenda is H.R. 3663, introduced by our colleagues Ms. Harmon and our colleague from Louisiana, Mr. Cowell. It extends for 2 years the Public Safety Interoperable Communications Act grant programs administered by NTIA and by the Department of Homeland Security. These grants are funded with auction proceeds from the FCC's 700 megahertz auction and are based on a recommendation from the 9/11 Commission concerning the shortcomings of interoperable communications among first responders. As required by law, the Department of Commerce's Office of Inspector General has conducted an annual assessment of the NTIA's management of the program. It found that NTIA met the statutory deadlines and requirements for making awards and for reviewing and approving grantees' communications plans. But that assessment also found that the original program deadline had not permitted states sufficient time in order to take full advantage of the program funds. And so the measure we consider today will extend the grant program for 2 additional years and ensure that states have sufficient time in order to expend grant awards. I would note that Mr. Cowell from Louisiana previously had introduced a separate measure on this topic. He and Ms. Harmon are co-sponsors of the bill that we are considering today, and I want to commend both Ms. Harmon and Mr. Cowell for taking this initiative. Let me say in conclusion of these remarks that I want to thank the Republican ranking member of our subcommittee, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns, and all subcommittee members on both sides of the aisle for the bipartisan way in which we have addressed concerns that were expressed on several of these 4 measures during our legislative hearing in June, and for the constructive work that all members have undertaken on a bipartisan basis in order to draft the amendments that resolve those concerns that will be considered by the subcommittee this morning. I particularly want to say thank you to the professional staff of the subcommittee on both sides of the aisle, to Amy Levine, our professional staff member on the Democratic side, and to Neil Freed on the Republican side for their outstanding work in association with members and also with interested stakeholders in order to resolve the concerns that have been presented to us. Those will be reflected in the various amendments we will consider today. That concludes my opening statement, and I'm pleased now to recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me echo your comments about the kudos and praise for the staff on my side and your staff in working together to solve these problems. These are very important 3 consequential bills, and the fact that they went so smoothly is a tribute to our staffs working together. The first bill under discussion is H.R. 1147, the Local Community Radio Act. The FCC created low-power FM service in 2000 to promote local programming. At the end of 2000, Congress restricted how close low-power stations may operate to full-power stations, obviously due to interference concerns. As a result, fewer low-power stations can be authorized. This bill would repeal the statutory limits. I still have some questions about the impact on full-power FM stations and the issue of interference, but these issues continue to be addressed by the bill sponsors and industry as we move towards full committee and floor consideration. Next, we are considering H.R. 1804, the Commercial Advertisement Loudness Mitigation Act, or the COM Act. This bill would require the FCC to mandate rules within 1 year prohibiting commercials from being excessively noisy or strident. This issue is more complex than it appears. Many different entities are responsible for producing and distributing the content consumers see and hear. Each element may be recorded and provided at a different volume level. Moreover, shows and movies have a dynamic sound range to cover everything from a quiet scene to an explosion. Commercials, meanwhile, tend to have a narrow sound range. Volume levels are typically set for the programming, which can throw off the volume levels for commercials. 2 years ago, the Advanced Television Systems Committee established a subgroup on digital television loudness. This subgroup consists of the leading experts on audio technology from all the major broadcast networks, cable production and post-production, manufacturing, and education. Since it was established, these audio technology experts have crafted a hard-fought consensus on the recommended practice that should be employed across the TV industry to deal with TV loudness concerns. I trust the collective wisdom of these technical experts and subgroups' hard work to craft a solution to the TV loudness issue, and I'd like to commend them for their work. The bill is H.R. 1258, the Truth in Caller ID Act of 2009. The third bill is H.R. 1258. Millions of Americans use caller ID in order to secure greater privacy for their families. Yet, as new technologies continue to be developed, caller ID spoofing has become a problem for consumers and businesses. This bill protects consumers by prohibiting the deceptive manipulation of caller identification information, a practice which is known as caller ID spoofing. Caller ID spoofing occurs when a customer masquerades as someone else by falsifying the number that appears on the recipient's caller ID display. Caller ID spoofing can make a call appear to come from any phone number the caller wishes. Although caller ID spoofing services promote themselves for use in prank calls or for entertainment purposes only, such services can be easily accessed and used by criminals. Caller ID spoofing has emerged as a useful tool for identifying thieves and other scam artists. In addition, many business functions, from credit card verification to automatic call routing, depend on caller ID for security purposes, which spoofing can render useless. This is an important piece of bipartisan consumer protection legislation, and obviously I urge its passage. The final bill under consideration is H.R. 3633. The Public Safety Interoperable Communications Grant Program Extension Act of 2009. As has been discussed in the past, the DTV Act authorized NTIA in consultation with DHS to make payments of up to $1 billion by September 30th, 2010 to carry out the Public Safety Interoperable Communication Grant Program, PSIC. The program helps public safety agencies acquire, deploy, and train for the use of inoperable communication systems that can utilize reallocated public safety spectrum in the 700 megahertz band. The PSIC program has awarded most of the money and approved over 300 investments to fund projects in all 50 states and U.S. territories. Moreover, in a report required by Congress, the Department of Commerce's Office of Inspector General found the states need additional time to comply with program requirements. This bill would simply allow funds to remain available for up to 2 more years and would extend the performance period by up to 2 years. I'd also like to acknowledge, as the chairman did, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Cowell, for his leadership and his foresight on this issue. He first called attention to this problem when he introduced H.R. 1819 in March of this year. I'm glad the subcommittee has taken up this issue. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I look forward to continuing our bipartisanship work as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stearns. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Eshoo, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for moving forward on these 4 important pieces of legislation today, and I especially appreciate the kind words that you said in your opening statement about my legislation, the CALM Act. I'm pleased to introduce the substitute amendment today and I want to thank your staff, the committee staff, for working closely with mine to make certain that the bill is ready for prime time. I also want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Stearns, and his staff for working with mine. I'll discuss the substitute in greater detail when I introduce it. I'm also pleased to co-sponsor two of the other bills we're taking up today, the Local Community Radio Act and the bill to extend funding for the PSIC program. On H.R. 1147, which codifies some components of LPFM, all I can say is it's about time. This struggle goes all the way back to when Bill Kennard was chairman, as you recall, of the FCC. It was absurd and ridiculous, I thought, that broadcasters went to such great lengths to block the public from having some small measure of access to the airwaves, and disgraceful, I think, that we had to spend more than $2 million to prove what the FCC already had shown, and that is that the LPFM would not interfere with full power stations. So now it's time to move ahead and finish this business, and I welcome doing so. As for H.R. 3633, our colleague Jane Harman has worked long and hard to ensure funding for public safety. She was instrumental in drafting legislation that created the PSIC program, and her bill ensures that funding continues under this program to make certain that public safety entities have access to funds for interoperability. That's really the operational word here, interoperability. So again, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your efforts in moving these bills forward, and for all of your cooperation for the bill that the Calm Act. Without your help, I don't think we'd be here today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eshoo. The gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Walden, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, on the Local Community Radio Act, I've had lingering doubts in the past about the engineering issues and the possible interference issues after reviewing the MITRE study and actually spending some time with a broadcast engineer I worked side by side with for nearly 22 years when we were in the business. I've come to the conclusion that it's time to move forward and that the interference issues are not what they once were or potentially were. Therefore, I will support the legislation. I would again reiterate the comment that I made during the hearing regarding the need for the FCC to maintain oversight over LPFM broadcasters to make sure that they, too, are following the rules under which they are licensed, and to pay special attention to the fact that they're in nonprofit organizations, state and local governments, non-commercial public safety radio services, and not engaged in the kind of activities that would be in opposition to the rules, specifically when it relates to advertising. The second issue regarding the Calm Act, I too will support that. I have some reservations about especially small cable operators and their ability to deal with some of these issues. And the retransmission consents, they aren't exactly given the negotiations, given the ability to determine what audio levels are set at when they're just taking programming and passing it through. I know from my days in broadcasting, in the radio side, we face some of the same issues because of network programming, where it's at the network level that the audio levels are different between the advertising and the programming. And even locally, we would face that at times, and certainly not something we wanted to have happen, but you have different audio transmission devices, if you will, feeding into a common stream, and those device settings may be altered, or there might be a problem with one over the other. And so it's always a challenge to try and get your audio levels to balance out. So hopefully, as we move forward, I appeal to you, Mr. Chairman, and to Ms. Eshoo to try to work between now and the floor to address this issue with the small cable operators especially. And with that, I will yield back the balance of my time and plan to support these bills today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walden, and we do intend to have the conversations that you have recommended, particularly with small cable operators. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Stupak, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On H.R. 3633, a bill to allow the funding for the Interoperable Emergency Communications Grant Program to remain available through fiscal year 2012, the Department of Commerce Office of Inspector General was correct to warn us that the congressional deadline had not afforded sufficient time for these funds to be spent Last week, my staff and I met with the Upper Peninsula County Commissioners who expressed the same concern and hope Congress would extend this act. I appreciate the swift action of the subcommittee and hope we can move quickly to pass this legislation in the full committee and the House. I share in Congresswoman Harmon's passion for public safety and am co-sponsor of her legislation. While the Public Safety Interoperability Communications Grant Program is a good step, we must realize that it only represents the first step. As I previously stated, the estimated cost of national interoperable broadband network is as low as $10 billion and maybe as high as $20 billion. In fact, at our last hearing, we heard an estimate as high as $40 billion now that we're discussing the 4G LTE network. In total, the grant program we're extending here today will only provide a maximum of 10% of the money towards the lowest of these cost estimates. That being said, as the Federal Communications Commission weighs the options on how to proceed with the D-block spectrum, we in Congress must be prepared to respond by providing additional public funding. This issue has languished far too long and will continue to languish until we make a commitment of public money on a continual, reliable basis. I must also comment on Mr. Doyle's legislation. While I understand it will pass on a voice vote, I still have concerns about the interference and cannot support the legislation as currently written. Like I said, I understand it will be passed on a voice vote, but I want to be recorded as a no vote on that one. I must compliment Ms. Eshoo on the good work on the CALM Act and Mr. Engel on the Caller ID Act, and I look forward to moving forward on 3 out of 4 of this legislation today, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stupak. The gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing this to Markup today. I want to thank Mr. Doyle and his leadership on this and allowing me to be part of the process. I'm a big fan of low-power FM in the way that it really empowers people in communities that need a louder voice. For example, in Omaha, already in the poorest area of my district, we have 100 black men that want to apply for a low-power license to be a community voice. One of the major churches, Salem Baptist Church, has already talked about having a low-power FM license. And these are the type of entities that will be empowered by this piece of legislation. So with that, just recognizing what's going to happen, I want to thank everybody for their work in this. I think the changes that have been made over the last year or two have actually made a good bill better and provide assurances to those that are in the industry that the interference will not impact them, or there won't be the interference that originally thought may impact commercial radio. So with that, Mr. Chairman, let's move on, and I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Terry. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and Chairman Waxman for so strongly supporting H.R. 1147. This legislation will bring communities across the country access to their airwaves, and I'm very proud of the support that this bill has from both sides of the aisle, including the bill's lead co-sponsor and my good friend Lee Terry. I appreciate the words we just heard from Mr. Walden, too, and from many other members of this subcommittee that have supported us. Through the creation of LPFM, the Federal Communication Commission sought to create opportunities for new voices on the airwaves and to allow local groups, including schools, churches, and other community-based organizations, to provide programming responsive to the local community needs and interests. When Congress passed the Radio Broadcasting Preservation Act in 2000, many of those organizations were prevented from communicating to their members, supporters, and residents on the FM dial by what were known as third adjacent protections. Basically, a low-power station had to be more than 3 clicks of the dial on both sides away from a bigger broadcaster. The bill was enacted because some incumbent broadcasters worried about the interference that new low-power FM stations might cause that would harm radio listeners across the dial. But thanks to the work of my good friend Chairman Dingell and others, Congress at that time also wisely mandated that an outside study be conducted to evaluate those claims. And Congress demanded that the FCC, our expert agency over the public's airways, review that outside study, analyze its impact on listeners and incumbent radio broadcasters, and then vote on its conclusions and recommend to us if we should reduce the impact of or eliminate the impact altogether the impact of that law. On a unanimous bipartisan basis, the FCC issued a report to Congress on February 19, 2004 that stated Congress should readdress this issue and modify the statute to eliminate the third adjacent channel distance separation requirement for LPFM stations. For a second time on November 27, 2007, and for a third time once again last month, September 17, 2009, right before this very subcommittee, all 5 commissioners agree that Congress should lift the restrictions on LPFM stations and allow the FCC to license new stations in more communities. Where they're allowed to exist under current law, LPFM stations have proven to be a vital source of information during local or national emergencies, and these stations promote the arts and education from religious organizations, community groups, organizations promoting literacy, and many other civically oriented organizations. But we have to act on the Commission's recommendations. Otherwise, these stations are prevented from operating, and communities across America, communities like mine, which are too large to have any slots for new LPFM stations at the 4th adjacent, but could fit several at the 3rd. The time has come for Congress to rewrite this law. The time has come to make the airwaves available to the people they serve. The time has come to bring low power to the people. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you very much for your support of this legislation and for including it in this markup today. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle, and thank you for your fine work on this measure. The gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate that we are having the markup today. A couple of comments on the bills. The low power FM is something that we have all worked on for a good period of time. I'm glad to see that bill brought forward, and I support the Truth in Caller ID Act. When I was in the state Senate in Tennessee and working at the state level, this is something that I supported and worked toward. I'm pleased to see the extension of funds and usage extended through the Public Safety Interoperable Communications Grant Program. It's timely and it's needed. I have concerns about the COM Act and the reach of government into this area. I hope we will continue to work on this as we move forward. I am not in support of that one of our 4 bills, and I thank you for the good work, and I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blackburn. The gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Inslee, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for moving these bills. I just want to focus on one bill in particular, Local Community Radio Act. And we know low power FM radio really serves our constituents, does in my state, and very unique programming. It just provides a unique service to underserved and underserved populations. In the last filing window for low power stations, over 100 community organizations, schools, and local governments applied for stations. It's my hope by moving the Local Community Radio Act, we're taking a very important step to ensuring all voices to be heard. And I want to compliment Coach Doyle for his perseverance to make this happen for people. He did a great job, and I know he'll remember this when he makes up the lineup card next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Inslee. I understand that the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Boyer, is not making an opening statement. The gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I want to do is thank the authors of these 4 bills. Mr. Doyle, for your work on the Low Power or Local Radio Community Act. Ms. Eshu for the COM Act. We've all had instances where we've been interrupted by commercials. Mr. Engel for Truth and ID. I certainly don't like seeing phone calls come through that aren't representative by the ID number. And then Ms. Harmon for her extension. So thank you, and I refer back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNerney. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Space, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Stearns. I'd like to use my time really to reiterate what some of my colleagues have already suggested concerning the small cable operators as it pertains to H.R. 1084. I don't think that many would dispute the need for a solution to the problem that the CALM Act seeks to rectify, and I commend my colleague from California for her work in this regard. The small cable operators that I've heard from would like to see this issue resolved as well. I certainly support the intent. There is, however, an issue raised by this bill that I believe should be addressed, and the bill, perhaps unintentionally, is prejudiced toward these small operators. Many of them do not do ad insertions themselves, and they do not have the right to alter national feeds unilaterally like some of the bigger cable companies. Small operators who often serve smaller and more rural areas simply pass through local broadcast signals and national programming to their customers and have no means of adjusting the loudness or the volume of commercials on the stream. So for these small operators, the bill could impose burdens and hefty fines on them. Mr. Chairman, I hope we can work toward a solution for these smaller operators so that they are not held accountable for something over which they have very little control. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Space. And as I assured Mr. Walden, we do have on our agenda for conversations meetings with the small cable operators in order to make sure those concerns are satisfactorily addressed. The gentleman from Michigan, the Chairman Emeritus of the Full Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Dingell, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Thank you for recognition, and thank you for holding today's markup. It's my hope that we will approve the bills under consideration today. They all serve legitimate consumer interests, and in the case of H.R. 3633 will provide improved protection in times of emergency. With regard to H.R. 1147, the Local Community Radio Act of 2009, although I continue to maintain a modest degree of skepticism about low-power FM radio and its sometimes curious encroachment on high-power station, I nevertheless feel that this bill and the amendment in the nature of a substitute which will be offered are fundamentally sound and therefore plan to support them. I would note I intend to offer my support in good part because of great affection and respect that I feel for my dear friend from Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle. Concerning H.R. 1084, the Commercial Advertisement Loudness Mitigation Act, and H.R. 1258, the Truth in Caller ID Act of 2009, I find these bills offer tangible benefits to consumers and plan to vote for them. Finally, I want to commend my dear friend and colleague from California, Ms. Harmon, for her fine work on H.R. 3663, which will extend the period during which grants under the Public Safety Interoperable Communications Grant Program may be awarded. This is common sense legislation and will ensure better and more coordinated public safety communications. I am a co-sponsor of this bill, and I urge my colleagues to join me in voting for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I commend you for your efforts today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dingell. The gentlelady from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just thank my colleagues for the bills that we're marking up today. Thank you for bringing them to this markup this morning. Given the work that we've done with our low-power FM stations in my district, which are operated by not-for-profits and education and religious organizations, the bill 1147 will be very helpful to them. I'm sure all of us will be happy not to have to change our volumes when the commercials come on. I appreciate the bill that has also been introduced by Ms. Harmon, having been on Homeland Security with her and gone through the difficulties of dealing with non-interoperable emergency communications. I really appreciate that bill. Also, in looking at limited liability issues in the future as we move H.R. 1258 forward, we would hope that the committee would continue to work towards a resolution of those limited liability issues in order to reduce unnecessary litigation. But I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this markup and my colleagues for the bills, and I look forward to working with you to take them to the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Christensen. All members have been recognized for opening statements. And now I'm pleased to call up the first of the 4 bills we're considering this morning. H.R. 1147, the Local Community Radio Act. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1147, a bill to implement the recommendations of the Federal Communications Commission report to the Congress regarding low-power FM service.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill will be dispensed with, and the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle, is recognized for the purpose of offering a manager's amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief with the description of the manager's amendment.
We need to offer it first, Mr. Doyle. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Mr. Doyle offers an amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1147, offered by Mr. Doyle, Pennsylvania.
Without objection, the reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief with my description of the amendment. I first want to thank you for your work and the work of Amy Levine on your staff on this manager's amendment. I also want to thank the many thousands of existing incumbent licensed broadcasters who support this bill, including members of the National Federation of Community Broadcasters and the Christian Community Broadcasters. I'm also very pleased by the support shown for the bill as introduced by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, the United Church of Christ, OC Incorporated, the United Methodist Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the National Council of Churches of Christ, Christian Coalition Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, the National Hispanic Media Coalition, NAACP, Communication Workers of America, the Future of Music Coalition, and the outstanding work from the Prometheus Radio Project and dozens of others of local and national groups across the country. We make the changes in the manager's amendment today to address concerns from other incumbent broadcasters, and I'm especially pleased that National Public Radio expressed its appreciation of these changes. I'd like to put this letter in the record expressing their support for the changes in the manager's amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
So, first, we simply amend current law instead of repealing it, and we also add language requiring the FCC to protect co-first and second adjacent channel spacing. The new language also grants substantial flexibility to the FCC to manage the spectrum. Second, the amendment takes a belt-and-suspenders approach to the interference complaints by adding process language permitting different evidence and a more streamlined process for full power stations complaining about interference, although to date, very, very few complaints have been filed at all. And lastly, we add protection for translator inputs. As we know, translators are lower power stations that rebroadcast a big station's signal and expand the station's coverage. This amendment adds even more protection to already strict FCC rules protecting translator inputs. Again, I want to thank Chairman Boucher and Chairman Waxman for their strong support, and Sean Chang, Roger Sherman, and Pelt Delgado for their hard work. But I would be remiss if I didn't also thank Pete Treatish from the Prometheus Radio Project and Cheryl Leanza from the United Church of Christ Office of Communication for their countless hours over their decade of work dedicated to expanding community radio across the United States. Their technical and legal expertise was essential, and their ability to show real local grassroots support for this bill has been critical. Mr. Chairman, I thank you and I yield back.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Doyle. Are other members seeking recognition to debate the manager's amendment in the nature of a substitute? Seeing none, I will ask if there are any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. And if there are none, the question then occurs on approving the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Mr. Doyle. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. And now the question occurs on the reporting of the bill as amended to the full Energy and Commerce Committee with a favorable recommendation. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill as amended is reported. Without objection, two statements of members of the House will be placed in the record, a statement by our committee colleague, Mr. Ringel from New York, and a statement by our colleague, Mr. Cowell from Louisiana. I now call up the second measure on our agenda for today, H.R. 1084, the Commercial Advertisement Loudness Mitigation Act, and the clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1084, a bill to require the Federal Communications Commission to prescribe a standard to preclude commercials from being broadcast at louder volume than the program material they accompany.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill will be dispensed with, and the gentlelady from California, Ms. Eshoo, is recognized for the purpose of introducing a manager's amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again for your support and this opportunity to introduce a substitute amendment that I think...
And Ms. Eshoo, before you comment on it, let's
yes.
just call it up officially. The clerk,
right.
please.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1084 offered by Ms. Eshoo of California.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, once again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this opportunity to introduce the substitute amendment that I think really strengthens the CALM Act and gives broadcasters, cable, satellite, and multi-channel video distributors ample opportunity to comply with the law. The premise of the bill is really simple, to make the volume of commercials and programming uniform so that spikes in volume do not affect the consumer's ability to control sound. My bill originally gave the FCC 1 year to implement regulations to that effect. The substitute amendment makes the following changes. First, we recognize that the Advanced Television Systems Committee, or the ATSC, has developed technical standards that will solve the problem of varied volume between commercials and programming with one stream that keeps the volume uniform. The law directs the FCC to adopt these engineering standards within 1 year. And I thank the organization for the work that they've done with us and on this issue. I look forward to voluntary and immediate adoption of the standards by broadcasters, cable, satellite, and all multi-channel service providers. But I have heeded the call for a compliance grace period. The second part of the substitute amendment allows this additional time for compliance. Those affected will have 1 year after the FCC adopts the rule for purchase and installation of the ATSC standard-based equipment. Third and finally, the substitute allows the FCC to grant up to 2 successive 1-year waivers for financial hardship. Small stations and cable operators certainly should be able to comply within 3 years, plus the amount of time it takes the FCC to adopt and release the rules. There will not be an open-ended waiver process that drags on for several years. Most frankly, this issue has dragged on for several years. And so we're putting some parentheses around this so that consumers get relief, but we want to be fair and have the right time frames for this. The problem of loud commercials is not new. It's bothered consumers and endangered, actually, hearing for decades. Constituents routinely contact me about these commercials wherever I am. I could be in the grocery store, the gas station. I have more spouses of members of Congress that have urged their spouses to co-sponsor the legislation. I think they're all tired of getting blasted out of their easy chairs or off their exercise equipment due to these ridiculously loud commercials designed to get their attention. So this has not only gotten mine, but everyone feels the same way. So I think it's time to do this. I'm relieved that the Advanced Television Systems Committee did not go deaf from these commercials before they heard my complaint. They got to work and they developed a technical fix that should end the practice of commercials outstripping the sound of programming. And they should be commended. I salute them for the work they've done. Now the time comes for implementation, and I wish that we could trust everyone to voluntarily comply, but the industry's track record has not been so great in this regard. So I appreciate this moment. It's been a little time in coming, but it's worth the effort. If I might, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a couple of comments about what some members have raised. I looked to the back of the hearing room. There's a young man there. I'm not going to say his name. Longtime fabulous staffer that was responsible for the CALM Act. He's now raised at the last minute with some of my colleagues the business of small cable operators. And most frankly, at this stage, I'm wary of an 11th hour amendment. And I want to study its potential effects before accepting it. I'll work with those that have raised the issue, but this is an 11th hour issue. No one has raised this for over 2 years. We don't have any real testimony or discussion about this language, and we need to make certain that we're not creating an unnecessary loophole. I think that the problem, as I see it right now, is really non-existent, because the larger cable operators will contract with the various networks to use proper modulation for retransmission. Then smaller operators will automatically receive properly modulated retransmissions from the Weather Channel or the Food Network, for instance. Local channels also are going to have to comply prior to retransmission. If the small cable operator is carrying a broadcast transmission that has a hardship waiver, then the cable operator may also apply for a waiver from the FCC. So the exemption seems to presume that broadcasters will not comply with the law and leave the small operators hanging out there. I expect all broadcasters to comply with the law or seek a waiver. And if they don't, there are serious consequences. So the question is whether this is necessary at all, but I'll listen to the industry's concern and make certain that we review the necessity of the language prior to the full committee markup. So with that, Mr. Chairman, my thanks to you again, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eshoo. Do other members seek recognition on the Eshoo Manager's Amendment? Does any member have amendments to the Manager's Amendment? If not, the question occurs on approving the Manager's Amendment offered by the gentlelady from California, Ms. Eshoo. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question now occurs on reporting the bill as amended to the full Energy and Commerce Committee with a favorable recommendation. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill as amended is favorably reported to the full committee. I now call up the third bill on our agenda, H.R. 1258, the Truth in Caller ID Act of 2009. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1258, a bill to amend the Communications Act of 1934 to prohibit manipulation of caller identification information and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and I have an amendment at the desk.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1258 offered by Mr. Boucher of Virginia, Mr. Barton of Texas, and Mr. Stearns of Florida.
I will recognize myself for 3 minutes in support of the manager's amendment, and I'm pleased to offer this amendment along with our committee colleagues, Mr. Barton and Mr. Stearns. The bill itself makes it unlawful for any person to falsify caller ID information with the intent to defraud or to cause harm. The amendment creates an exception for authorized law enforcement activities, and it also harmonizes the bill with a separate measure being considered by the House Judiciary Committee that imposes a criminal penalty for caller ID spoofing. It's a very concise amendment. Those are the changes that it makes, and I urge its approval. Does any member seek recognition on the manager's amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, who is? Yes, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, co-sponsor of the manager's amendment.
Simply to say that I support the manager's amendment, Mr. Chairman, and support you and Mr. Stearns, and I think we ought to compliment Congressman Engel of New York, who's also worked very hard on this issue. This spoofing practice is something that we've been aware of for a number of years. It's nefarious. It shouldn't be allowed, and this bill would, if passed and implemented, would make it very difficult to continue that practice. So I support the underlying bill and certainly support the manager's amendment and all the members on both sides who worked on it. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton, and thank you for your assistance and that of Mr. Stearns with this measure. Do other members seek recognition on the manager's amendment? The question then occurs on approving the manager's amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The manager's amendment is approved. Are there amendments to the manager's amendment? Hearing none, the question occurs on approving the bill as amended with a favorable report to the full committee. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill as amended is reported to the full committee. I now call up the fourth bill on our agenda, H.R. 3633, a bill to allow funding for the interoperable Emergency Communications Grant Program to remain available through fiscal year 2012. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3633, a bill to allow the funding for the interoperable Emergency Communications Grant Program established under the Digital Television Transition and Public Safety Act of 2005 to remain available until expended through fiscal year 2012 and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill will be dispensed with. Are there amendments to the bill? The gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm very pleased that Representative Herman has introduced legislation to provide additional time for states to utilize federal grants made available through the Public Safety Interoperable Communications Grant Program, known as you know as PSIC. That grant program funds state projects that provide public safety personnel with interoperable communications equipment and training for system users. The Act appropriated $1 billion for the program from the proceeds of the auction of analog spectrum reclaimed by the digital television transition. In our current environment, of course, public safety needs this assistance more than ever. Unfortunately, under current law, funding for this interoperability project will expire in September 2010. Given the enormous importance of interoperable public safety communications, we must provide states the time and the funds necessary to complete projects that are already underway or in planning stages. If adopted, Representative Harman's legislation, which I co-sponsor, will provide this necessary time. H.R. 3633 represents the best approach to the problem for 3 reasons. 1, it minimizes the regulatory burden on public safety. 2, it creates incentives for public safety to act quickly. And 3, it protects public money. More specifically, the proposed legislation would allow all states an automatic 1-year extension. This will reduce the regulatory burden on the states associated with individual extension requests. Some states may not need more than a year, and they can avoid filing an extension request altogether. The automatic 1-year extension also gives an incentive to states that are on track for completion to complete that work rapidly so they don't have to go through the extension request project. But those states that need more than a year to complete projects will have the flexibility to request an additional year if the head of NTIA determines that the circumstances warrant an extension. The criteria enumerated in the proposed legislation will ensure that the Assistant Secretary's decisions are based on a complete evaluation of the extension request. This discretion allows the Assistant Secretary to protect public money, and ill-advised or mismanaged projects may not be eligible for continued funding. Representative Harman's bill, H.R. 3633, has widespread support. The National Governors Association, the Association of Public Communications Officers, the National Emergency Management Association, the Telecom Industry Association, the City of L.A., the L.A. County Sheriff, among others. Representative Harman's bill, incidentally, is identical to a bipartisan measure introduced in the Senate by Senators Rockefeller and Hutchinson. If we move this bill through the House quickly, we're going to have a fighting chance of making this extension happen in time for public safety to plan and budget accordingly. And one of the painful lessons that our nation learned in the aftermath of September 11 and from the response to Hurricane Katrina was how absolutely essential it is for first responders to be able to communicate seamlessly with one another when they're responding to an emergency. This is as true in a big city like Los Angeles as in a rural state like Vermont, where emergency personnel are sparse, and in many of the parts of the state we have to bring many jurisdictions together to provide the response. And if obviously we're going to ask our first responders to put themselves at risk to protect us, we must provide them with the tools they need to do their jobs effectively. I think on behalf of Representative Herman and I, we urge our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join us in supporting the Herman legislation. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Welch. Do other members seek recognition to offer amendments? The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton.
Mr. Chairman, I don't seek recognition to offer an amendment. I just want to make a comment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
This legislation is non-controversial, and Congressman Welch and Congressman Harmon are to be commended for sponsoring it and bringing to the attention of the committee as members of the committee. But as you pointed out in your opening statement, I'm told we also need to compliment Congressman Gow of New Orleans. His original bill was brought to the attention of the committee in a letter to Chairman Waxman, and Chairman Waxman and Chairman Boucher have been very supportive of moving this bill. It's not quite the same bill that Congressman Gow introduced, and my staff informs me that he's very supportive of the bill and hopes to co-sponsor it, and it's our intention to allow him to manage the time on the floor if this bill gets to the floor, which I think it will. But before we move too forward, I just wanted to let the committee know that we have a young Republican congressman from New Orleans who's worked hard on this issue, and at the appropriate time, I hope he's given the proper consideration. But having said that, the majority has been very complimentary in working on it, and we're very prepared to move the bill with the improvements in the bill that Mrs. Harmon and Mr. Welch and yourself, Mr. Chairman, have incorporated.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Barton, and I certainly acknowledge the work that Congressman Cow did on this measure. He is a co-sponsor of the bill along with Ms. Harmon, and I commend the good work that both of these able members have done in bringing this measure to us. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just echo the ranking member, Mr. Barton's comment. Ms. Cow had introduced this in March, and then again he revised it in July. We had in his opening statement, I would say to my colleague from Texas, we put his opening statement as a part of the record by unanimous consent, so he has officially an opening statement part of this markup so that his efforts are recognized by himself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stearns. Do other members seek recognition for the purpose of offering amendments? The Chair hears none. The question, therefore, occurs on reporting the bill to the Energy and Commerce Committee with a favorable recommendation. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is reported to the full committee with a favorable recommendation. I want to say thank you to all of the members and their staffs for their excellent work on a bipartisan basis and allowing us to move very expeditiously through this markup of 4 measures this morning. We have completed our work within 10 seconds of 1 hour, and I think that is a tribute to all here. And so with thanks to everyone who has cooperated in this effort, this markup stands adjourned.